Can somebody tell me how, as late as 2022, I didn't know that Magic the Gathering could be a board game? For years, I knew about the card game. I knew about the cards and the way that the various decks could be built, and that there's so much as far as like the individual packs you can buy, and what you can and what you can't use, and stuff like that. But I didn't know that this was a board game. Everyone, Hobbyist here. We are back at it again with another board game tutorial. This time I'm going to be covering Magic the Gathering Arena of the Planeswalkers. Like I mentioned in my beginning, I had no idea that they turned Magic the Gathering into a board game. I had only just known about the card game and the various decks, but this game in particular, I think I just enjoy it a lot more. It's a lot easier to grasp through my personal experiences when trying to introduce Magic the Gathering to other people. Because with the card game, as much as I love the card game, as much as I love the mechanics and the various deck building that you can build, and the customization is the biggest reason that I enjoy it, I feel that this board game is a lot easier to digest. And it's not so much as, well, you got this nice deck, but there's this deck, this deck, this deck, this deck that can also be added too. And you want to take out these cards, and it's too many components for, like I said, in my personal experience, for the card game to introduce to somebody who's never touched Magic the Gathering a day in their life. But with the board game, especially with its components, I think it's a little bit easier. It definitely has its complexities, but I think that's just with any board game in general. So let me go ahead and get into the starting components. The first thing that I want to introduce is the fact that you get 5 Planeswalkers to choose from that each have their own varying playstyle to them. Starting from left to right, we've got Chandra Nalier, who is a pyromancer, and she has her own set of skills regarding her pyromancy. We have Liliana Vess, who is the necromancer. We have Gideon Jura, who is the white planeswalker here. He is very combat ready in all those sorts of areas. That's his sort of skill set. We've got Nisa Ravan, who is a planeswalker elf who has like a lot of connections with nature and all that sort of thing. And then we have Jace Beleren, who is like mind magic, illusions, telepathy, memory manipulation, and things of that nature. He's more of a psychic type of character in comparison. So first things you get is those 5 to choose from in the various playstyles that they have. The next thing that gets added is that each of the individual characters have their own color armies that match their particular player. So we have all of these for the blue planeswalker. And the thing to know as far as regarding when you're expounding upon Magic the Gathering is that it's only referenced by color, simply because with the expansions that they have that are added and the various customizations that you can have, these may or may not be the pieces that you use. So any of the expansions are always going to be marked by color. You do all of blue, and you can combine various sorts of blue. Or all of green, all of white, all of black, all of red, and all of the various pieces if you're trying to mix match with the various expansions. But when we're just talking about the base game of Magic the Gathering Arena of the Planeswalkers, you are strictly sticking with the illusions and the 3 phantoms that go with Jace. When it comes to the green planeswalker, she's got 3 elves, as well as 3 Goliath-like creatures here that go with hers. When you hop over to Gideon, Gideon has 3 white rhino units that aren't necessarily specified towards him. Again, there's no specifics as far as regarding that these only belong to these. It's always going to be associated by color for every single planeswalker that exists inside this game and any of the expansions that you add, as well as 3 hook people that go with it that represent the white army. With Liliana, It's simply 3 black zombies, as well as 3 ogre-like creatures as well that go with hers, or any black planeswalker that you're going to use. And then lastly, we've got our Pyromancer, who's got 3 fire cats, as well as 3 phoenixes that can be used to consist of the red player's army. In addition to the totaling number of the 30 squad figures, because all of the armies are called squads. Each of the squads also has their own cards. There would be a total of 15. However, in my particular set, because of where it was got, there's definitely stuff that's missing. So we have the 2 red squad cards, and then we have the Planeswalkers card as well. And then it's the same for the green. We have all 3 for the green, all 3 for the white, and then just moving out a little bit. Got 3 for the blue. And like I said, this set is incomplete, but there would be 3 for black as well, if you are buying a totally brand new set for yourself. Altogether, there are a total of 60 different spell cards, but you separate each of them to where they all go with the respective colors. So we have these black spells here that go with the black planeswalker of your choice. Again, depending on if you're just doing this game, or if you're adding expansions that have other planeswalker choices in other decks to be built. It's all black. Then we have red, red. We have blue, blue. We have white, white. And lastly, we've got green with green. In addition to the 60 total spell cards each distributed, and the 15 army/squad cards that are distributed, you have a total of 10 attack dice that are going to be used very frequently inside of any game that you're playing. In addition to that, we have a 20-sided die, and one of the rookie mistakes that I made, because I saw a 20-sided die, was assuming that this is what you use to move. I'll explain in greater detail, but that is not the case inside of this game. So you have a 20-sided dice that does serve a purpose. Just so I'm explaining all of the terminology, so that way anything that I mention in the tutorial moving forward, I'm going to explain a bit of the terms that I'm going to be using. So whenever I refer to figures, figures are all of the squad figures and creatures, and it's all of the planeswalkers. So all of the cards that you see in front of you are all of the figure cards that are here. And then the 10 attack dice are for your figures, as well as the 20-sided die for figures, and the spells are all for figures. But in addition to that, we also have glyphs as well. They're generally battlefield boosts and things of that nature, but only ever 3 of them are going to be permanent, with the 4th one being used as a temporary glyph that happens. So we have a toughness glyph that can be permanent. We have a power that can be permanent, a movement that can be permanent, and the only temporary one, knowledge. So you get 4 different glyphs inside of this as well. So as we can see, I'm not even done yet, but we've got a lot of components already just inside of this base game here. In addition to all of these cards and other components that we We also have a total of 4 different hex-sanded tiles. So you are going to get 2 3 hex-sided tiles, which are going to play a factor inside of terrain and various things of that nature. So you're going to get 2 of those, which can sit perfectly like that. And then you also get 2 of the single individual units as well that can be used to create mountainous terrain and have height advantages and things like that. So that is another component that is also added. In addition to everything that we've covered so far, we also get these barrier type of pieces as well. Just so you know, it doesn't normally come together. It's 2 pieces of cardboard that slide right into each other to build that contraption, and it can stand up. And it's the same with this rock one that you get as well. It's 2 pieces that can slide perfectly in and out of each other. So that is the other thing that you have. In addition to the figures and the squads that you get on top of the figure cards, the attack dice, the 20-sided die, the spells, the glyphs, the terrain, and the 2 cardboard things, you also get 30 damage markers. This isn't 30, but like I mentioned earlier, the set that was bought for me at the time was an incomplete set, so ideally you would have 30 of these whenever you got them. And then in addition to those, you also have a tiny damn turn marker. That way you can play out a certain amount of rounds and all that sort of thing. And this encompasses of the individual small pieces. The last thing that I would like to show you guys is that you get exactly 6 cardboard terrain pieces that fit together as a board. And the way that the board is shaped, as you could probably see here, is that they connect together like puzzle pieces. So that way you can build the various board styles. And the way that the board styles as far as setup is concerned is based on what kind of game you're trying to play. Whether you're playing an individual one-on-one game, whether you are trying to play in teams and work together in order to take each other out, or if you're doing a free-for-all, everybody for themselves. For the sake of this tutorial video, I'm simply going to show you the setup for the free-for-all, as it encompasses every component that is needed in order to give you a sort of baseline when it comes to what it is that you're looking for. Of course, it's variant and subject to change if you're trying to do something different, and any of the expansions that you may or may not be interested in are going to affect those too. But now, let's go ahead and switch over to the board setup for a free-for-all game. So this is what your board is going to look like whenever you are playing the melee board configuration, which is the free-for-all configuration. There's also the skirmish, which is the team battles, and then there's the duel, which is the individual one-on-one scale. So this is what it's going to look like when you assemble your board together. Again, they fit like puzzle pieces, so should be very easy. In fact, one of the things that I enjoy about this is the fact that this game, because it's puzzle piece, it can fit on carpet pretty well. You don't have any overhang or any pieces of the board that might be lifting up off the ground and moving things around because it's not a very even flat surface, but it is definitely a very good reason that it is cardboard and it fits perfectly right on my carpet floor. So the next things that you're going to do after your board has been set up is that you take your first barrier piece and you set it right here in between the 2 sets of water where it's the 4 and then the long strip here. On the opposite side, you're going to take the long end, turn that around, and place that like such, to where now we're looking like we have 3D terrain here. The next thing that you're going to do is that you are going to assemble the mountain that is going to take place right in the middle, right in between. So all you do is that you place the 3 down, you place the other 3 right on top of it, and then you go 1, and then 1, to where now you have a couple of steps up, and then you have the little mountain area in the center. The other things that you're going to have, and this is the only time that you're ever going to do this, in fact, it's the first time I've seen it in any board game or in general, is that you're going to actually place the rule book on the side of your board. And the reason that you're doing this is that right on the right side where you see the little red numbers and stuff is your turn marker track. So at any particular point, if you're not particularly interested in going the full 60 turns that the game might require, or the 48 turns, or the 36, you decide as a group how many turns that you want to be able to go before you decide to end the game, and then you add up the scores. Because even though your whole objective inside of the free-for-all is to be the last Planeswalker standing, sometimes, depending on the players that you're playing with, it might take you a bit longer than normal. So players are going to be thinking about doing certain things on their turn and all that sort of nature. So this is a kind of more of a time crunch to kind of hasten the game a little bit, and so that way you can get through multiple sessions, which I think is really nice. It's great at saving time management, so all you gotta do is that this little turn marker from before, you place it on the number 1, and then at the end of every person's turn, you move it up until you get all the way to any of the reds, depending on how long you want your game to go. So coming back to the glyphs and the actual board itself, as you probably saw from the rule diagram, there are no letters actually hidden from the game. Therefore, you place each of the individual permanent glyphs and the temporary glyphs right where they say that they're supposed to be. So, knowledge goes right here, and it sits in here until it is collected by a planeswalker. We've got the movement, which is going to be placed right in the center here. And then we've got the toughness, which is going to be behind the rock canyon piece that is on this opposite side. And then lastly, the power is going to go on the opposite side of this. So it'll be right out of camera for you guys, so that way you won't be able to see it very well. From the 5 planewalkers that you've got sitting in front of you here inside of just the base game, you pick which one you're going to be. So in our demonstration, I'm going to be Jace, and everybody else will then pick one. If you're not particularly sure who you want to pick to go first, then you can roll the 20-sided die, and whoever rolls the highest gets to pick first. Then, of course, everybody randomly picks their character, and that completes that step. Then once you've completed the character selection and all the rest of the board's been set up, you then match the corresponding rulebook with the setup, and then you place all the planewalkers that you're going to be playing with in the surrounding areas. That way, they're far enough away to where any of the ranged characters, which I'll get into greater detail on, aren't being able to immediately take advantage against other players and all that sort of thing. So these are the locations. It's not particular order in regards to which planeswalker goes in which area. There's no right way to do it. But these are the locations in the free-for-all area that a planeswalker's got to go. So it could be any combination to where any of these characters could be in any of these locations, but they have to be in these particular spots. The last thing that needs to be done before you complete your full setup is that all the army cards, depending on the planeswalker that was chosen, are then rearranged and distributed out to each and every single individual Planeswalker that's in play, including all the army and figures that are going to be used. So each and every single one. Once that's been completed, you then give, for each of the Planeswalkers, their respective color armies that match the color of the Planeswalker. So all of blue to blue, all of red to red, all of green to green, so on and so forth. You give them out, and they're not spawned onto the board right away. Now, when it comes to the actual cards themselves, there are a couple of key things that you first need to look at. First thing, at the very top, there's the area where it says Planeswalker, and that is the card color / the mana symbol. And that essentially is the border of the card that indicates what color the army is. Planewalkers can summon only other non-Planewalker army cards that have the same mana symbol and or color, meaning that the symbols have to match in order for them to be able to be summoned, and the colors have to match in order for them to be summoned. And that just simply means that you gotta watch what colors you have, because as you introduce expansions and other Planeswalkers, decks, and army types, those figures need to match in order to be played in. So if you're using Jace as your main Planeswalker of choice, then any blue cards that you get from any other expansions or any other blue figures that you will get, those are what you use, and not any other color or any other creature just because it seems beneficial. Blue goes with blue, red goes with red, black with black, so on and so forth, regardless of how many expansions or rules that you have in play. Aside from the life and the simple picture that's off to the left, we also have the movement, and the movement is the maximum number of moves that you can take in any particular given turn. The range beneath that is how far away you can be and still be within range to attack somebody. The swords is how many dice you roll whenever you are attacking, and the 3 is how much toughness you have when you're defending. So it's your power and your toughness. And then the green dot that's on the picture determines your line of sight, and that plays directly into your range, and it plays into various spells and abilities. And that green dot is what you are looking at onto the figures when it comes to determining what line of sight is. The gray areas, the dark gray areas especially, show what part of the figure can be attacked. So if there are figures that might be sticking out behind walls or that sort of thing, and that is visible from the perspective of the figure, then it is open to be attacked. There is, of course, also the size and the height of the actual figure itself. Whenever you're just looking at it as scale. The bottom half of the card explains the abilities, and each of the abilities is different depending on the Planeswalker or the creature type, and it's always going to change. And then the type is always going to tell you whether the card is for a Planeswalker or whether it's for a hero, which is only specific in other expansions. And then there's Planeswalkers. And then the number that is right to the bottom left-hand corner, it's not visible on this card, but there are some that contain a symbol that show that it is unique. And you can't pick 2 of the same unique card. This is only really important when it comes to expansions and rules. And then, of course, the O symbol that's at the bottom right, it's a very tiny symbol down here, shows you what set this card belongs to, whether it's for the base game or whether it's for other various sets. So all of those are going to tell you those sort of things. When it comes to the actual spells tell you whether it is two sorts of different things that all planeswalkers, regardless of who they are, have. You have sorceries, which are going to play a role into how you use them. They're more immediate use, and they're one and done uses. Whereas enchantments can either be enchantments for your planeswalker, it can be hidden to where nobody else can see what your enchantments are, or it goes onto your creatures and it can make them better. And those are a lot more permanent effects, unless other spells or other conditions might remove them from the game. And then, of course, the spells are indicated by the colors and the mana symbols as far as who they belong to, and if they can be a part of a deck building set. When it comes to complicating things, as far as deck building goes, there's a certain cost that you can have, but we're not really going to go over all of that because that's just too much information for just a beginning introductory level when it comes to the cards. So you only really need to focus on is the life, the movements, the range, the power, the toughness, target points, and maybe the hit zone for any of your particular characters. Your play area has been successfully set up. You're going to take your spell deck that matches your color of your figures, and you're going to shuffle them up and then set up your library. Your library is what you are drawing from, and then you're going to then take the top 3 cards from your library, and these are the sorceries or enchantments that you might have at your disposal. Unlike with everything else, these are the cards that are going to be kept hidden. These are cards that only you know about. Nobody else is going to know about these cards until they come into play. So, whatever your abilities say are going to vary your strategy, of course, as far as what you are able to do. And during any given turn, when your turn officially starts, you'll perform 5 actions in this order. You'll draw a spell card, choose an army card, move 1 or more figures on your army card. You have the option of your 4th action to attack with 1 or more figures on your army card. And then the 5th one is to move the turn marker on the turn track to the next number. So let me go into detail with each of those. The only exception to this rule, in regards to the first action of drawing a spell card, is if you are the first player to go. So with Jace, in our example, being the first player, he's not going to draw any more cards from his library. So that is what he is unable to do on his first go. During his ability to then choose an army card, he can choose any one of his army cards to use on his turn. He can use any activated abilities from the cards that he has out. He could then use a variety of certain ways to where you can now start taking advantage of the creatures. But in the early get-go, when it comes to this will be your time to then summon your creatures into the game. So you choose from one type of your army types. So for Jace, we have the Leyline Phantoms, and then we have Illusionary Projections. And we get to choose a maximum of 2 of them in order to summon them. And the way that they work for summoning is that they have to be within 5 clear sight spaces of your Planewalker. Now, whenever I am in reference to line of sight, if you remember from on the card when I showed the green dot, it has to be directly from the perspective of that Planeswalker. So, coming up to Jace here, his face is this line of sight. So now let me get a little closer towards the board so that I can show you what it looks like from his line of sight, so that way you have an idea of where, if we want to summon these phantoms, they could go. So for the summoning, Jace has directly in front of him, if you can see here, where he could summon 2 Leyline Phantoms. He also has directly to his right, if we switch his perspective a little bit, to where he could also summon in that direction as well. He could also come over here to the left and then summon 5 in that direction. There's no jagged or wiggy wonky areas. So we'll take those two, and the furthest away that we could summon is we could summon as far as over here. So anywhere within that radius is as far as we can summon creatures. So it could be anywhere, not here because it is not within his line of sight, but we could also summon right here. And we have a variety of options to us as well, because this is within a direct line of sight, if I turn Jace this way, to where that is where the Leyline Phantoms can be summoned. It's the same way if we decided that we wanted to summon the illusionary projections, but this is the only time that you have the ability to do this, during your choose an army card action. The next action that you can take is then move one or more of your figures on your army card. Now, you could choose to move any or all of your figures on the army card that we have chosen. So, because of this turn, we had chosen our relax action to summon our Leyline Phantoms. We have the ability to move one or both of them. Whenever you are choosing to move a character, you have to watch on their card what their movement is. As we can see here, we've got a 6 for movement that we can do for the Phantoms. So now, you can move in any direction. You can move horizontally, vertically, diagonally. Doesn't matter which way. You can move them up to that movement. So, for example, you can move up to 6 spaces. You can move 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, and that's for 6 of them. And you can do that for each individual one. So with our 2 Phantoms, we could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We could do something like that. But it could be any amount up to 6 as your maximum. And that is just for basic movement. And as far as the order goes, the order does not matter. Also, when it comes to landing on other figures, let's say we try to pass our buddy here, we can do that because they're the same creature, they're in the same squad, so they're totally fine to move like that. Sometimes, depending on the position that you might want to take on, you might want to move up onto this big tile here in the middle. Maybe you're trying to get to that movement over there. And the way that that works is that when you are moving to a higher level, you have to count the side of each higher level as one space, as well as the space that you land on. So for example, if we're trying to climb up to the second level here, and we have our 6 movement, it's 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, and we can't go up to the second one because it would require 3 movement in order to get to the top. If we were down at the bottom and we were trying to climb our way up with our 6, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in order to reach the top. And then you could come down for 6. Whenever it comes from moving down from whatever limit that you might have, that is known as a height limit. So characters are going to have certain height limits, and you count height limits from measuring the figure from the bottom to the top and where they line up on a particular height. So as we can see here, from bottom to top, most figures are about 4 stacks tall. And if you're trying to jump down from any areas that are shorter than that, then you don't have a problem. You can just come up for your 3 in order to make it to the top, and then you can easily just jump down. However, if you're coming down from an area from a height limit that is higher than your figure, this can apply to squads, it can apply to your Planeswalker, you have the risk of falling, and you could definitely take fall damage. The way that that works is that because all figures are going to have a height of 4, if you choose, you come down from your height of 4, and then you have to then, using one of these combat dice, you have to then roll it and find out if you are able to survive the fall. If you roll a shield or let's say a blink, you're completely safe. You don't take any fall damage. If you roll a cross weapons, however, you do take fall damage. And all that simply requires of you is that you could then take a damage marker, one of these, and place it either on your figure's base, if it makes it easier for you to remember, or you could just place it on the card and remember that one of them has taken 1 damage. It's entirely up to you. That option is more of if it's your own preference. If you decide that you want to come down from the highest places, but there happens to be water right next to you, then you don't have to worry about the die roll because you're constantly safe if you fall straight into water as such. If you decide that you want to move across the water, say you're trying to come after Gideon right here, who is on the opposite side of water, then if you move into water, you have to immediately stop, and that ends your movement for that character for the rest of that turn. If you are trying to move out of water, if you're moving from water to land, you add 1 to be able to then move out of your water. So for example, if we are moving our Phantom Walker from the water place, and we're moving to land, you count 2 spaces because the water is considered a lower level than the land space. So then you move 4 additional spaces to move the 6. So if we're trying to come out of here, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you get to build up momentum when you're coming out of the water because you're a little bit deeper. So that's when you are coming out of the water. And that is all the movement that is for the single base figures. Planewalkers follow this rule. Squads follow this rule. Heroes follow this rule. Granted, there might be a little bit of mechanic differences in that nature when it comes to individual abilities and the way that the expansions play out. But what happens for the characters or the creatures who have 2 bases instead of 1? For example, Chandra's cats have 2 bases instead of just the original 1. So what do we do there? While you are following rules, of course, being within 5 sightline spaces of a Planeswalker in order to summon them, the way that the double-based figures work is that you are always leading from the front. Both bases have to be directly on a space. So, just as an example, this fire cat is right here. The way that he moves is that if we're turning directions, then you pick up the whole base, and they have to be within 2, like such. And as they move, they are moving 2 spaces at a time for each half of the base. So each base is counting as 1 movement whenever we are coming forward. So it's always the first space is going to be whatever's leading in front is 1, and then the back is 2, 3, 4, 5. Because it is using both legs in order to move. Whenever a double-based figure is moving across, it cannot have half of itself hanging out of the water because the water is considered a lower elevation in comparison to the regular terrain. Therefore, if you are moving across water with a double-spaced figure, it has to both be in the water like such. in order for it to count. If you are trying to move him up a couple tiles, let's say you're trying to climb up with your double space figures, then it's still the same rules still apply. The figure is only too tall, so whenever it's moving, it's always 1, 2, 3, 4. So it requires more movement for double space figures to move in comparison to the single space figures, because they have a lot more ground that they are covering at the same time. And whenever it comes to range and as far as how movement goes, it's always going to count the leading front end when it comes to moving those in comparison to the single figures. So that is the big difference between the single and the double figures. And now that we've kind of got an idea of movement, let's transfer back to the single figures and go over moving into these constructs that we have here, the 3D constructs that play an advantage in possibly taking cover, from getting out of sight, from being out of range, and all of that sort of thing. Coming back to Jace here, if Jace wanted to retreat to the sand corner just to kind of hide out, maybe it's a better strategic positioning in comparison to anywhere else at the moment, then he can use his 6 movement to get right in that corner and hang out right there. At the current moment, there is no characters within Jace's sightline, and Gideon is in range of being attacked by Jace. And that's the simple way of doing it. Any overhang pieces that are covering up squares, the Planeswalker or the figure in question can't hide back there. It's obviously more difficult for double space figures to be able to hide in tight corners like that, because, well, they're bigger. It makes all the sense in the world if you ask me. And when it comes to the elevation portions, when I was talking about the mountains and you were climbing those, in addition to hiding in the tight corners, figures are not adjacent to each other when elevation changes are occurring. So if I'm popping over back this way, that lion that's right there is not adjacent to Gideon right now, because he is on a higher elevation and is somewhere else entirely in comparison. So now let's say that you decided that you want to go ahead and be on the offensive, and you want to be the one to attack another planeswalker or another army. If you want to do that, the way that attacking works is that before you can attack with a figure, you need to check your figure's range. So for Jace, because he's a planeswalker, his card says that he has a range of 7. So any range of 7 spaces, he can then attack. So right now, based on this current camera shot, we can see that exactly 1, 2, 3 spaces across, we could then attack Gideon. Or, with the way that elevation works, if you remember that going up counts as spaces, we could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and still reach the fire cat that's in the distance as well from here. Chandra's too far away. Liliandra's too far away. Everyone else is too far away. Only Gideon and the fire cat within Jace's range in order to attack. But now, to show you how battles work, you first declare who is attacking who. Then, once you have determined who is attacking who and all that sort of thing, you then look at your cards and you determine based on the number of cross weapons you have, and that is going to be the power that you fight with. So for example, Jace has 5 power, so you then roll with 5 attack dice. With Gideon being on the defensive, he has got a toughness of 5. So it's even offense, even defense against each other. So it's 5 dice versus 5 dice. So if we're rolling for both, we can see that Jace has got 2 shields, which do nothing for offense. But he's also got 2 cross weapons. And whenever blanks are rolled, that just means nothing happens. It's not a wild that you can use. It's just that nothing happened. So right now, Jace has got an attack of 2. With Gideon, we can see that he had gotten 2 shields, 1 cross weapon, and 2 blanks. And the way that combat works is that you match if there are any shields that were thrown, you match them with the cross weapons of the offensive, and that simply means that the defense has successfully blocked out the attacker. But that is only if there aren't any leftover cross weapons. So for example, if there was 3 attack and there was only 2 defense, 2 of the damage would cancel out and there would still be 1 left over for damage to actually take place. In which case, if damage occurs, then you put a damage marker on the card of the Planeswalker, or you could put it on the base of the character. That is entirely up to you. And that is basically how that works. There are abilities that may or may not play a role into a character's attack or defense, depending on what cards you used from your library, or what is currently in your hand. Those might play a role into affecting how easy or how difficult a battle might be. There might be glyphs that you're standing on, because the way that glyphs are, with the only exception being knowledge, is that as long as there's a character standing on a glyph, there's a toughness glyph and a power glyph. If you are standing on either one of those, you add that on top of whatever you are currently rolling with. So you're going to roll an extra toughness die if your character is on a toughness, or you're going to roll an extra power die if you're on offense and you're the one that's attacking, for any creature of yours or any figure of yours that is standing on the power as well. So it's a very easy combat system. And then sometimes depending on the character, it might say that it might need a line of sight. And then you just simply follow the line of sight rules. If you can still clearly see a character, if it's not obscured by a wall or anything like that to where they're hard to see, then they are within your attack range as well. And then after the end of your turn, all that simply takes place once the attacks have finished is that you then move the turn marker to end your turn. When it comes to your library and what it is that you possess, there is a maximum hand limit of 5 cards. However, if you manage to go through your whole library of spells, and then you are then asked to draw more cards, you have no access to your graveyard, aka your discard pile. Meaning that you are out of luck of using spells, and you have to work with what you've got, with what the enchantments and sorcery that you've used, and any boosts that you might have gained, and then you just have to roll with it. Hopefully you don't run out of cards, but that's pretty much how that works. Overall, what do I think of Magic the Gathering Arena of the Planeswalkers? There's definitely some mechanics that make this a little bit more difficult, and there's definitely things that make it a little bit easier. With the card game in particular, there's just a lot of variables in whatever decks that you pick, and the way that you organize your play style. There's going to change your strategy and the way that you play. With a board game, it's still definitely a lot as far as the rules of attacking, following creatures and magics and all of that sort of thing, and all the various variables that might go into all of that. So there's definitely some depth to this. This is definitely not a first-time gamer type of game. But hopefully this board game was helpful enough to you to where if you're looking for something that isn't the card game version of Magic the Gathering, that this could be something that you get into. And there are 2 more expansions that offer a different set of creatures, offer a different set of new Planeswalkers that you can play, different spell cards to where now you can start building your decks, and then the point system as far as how it is that you are going to customize your points and whoever wins based on how many turns that you had set for yourself. And then the way that the player score is determined towards the very end is that if scoring is needed, if you haven't completed the objective of wiping everybody out yet, each player scores points for each figure still on the battlefield. You total the number of price per figure cost for all figures remaining to determine a player's score. So at the bottom right of every single card is the value of how many figures you have left. So right now, for example, at the bottom right of Jace's, it says that his cost is 340. If you manage to keep everybody alive, you might have a maximum of less than 500. But you can dip below that depending on how many figures are in your graveyard. Also, if figures do die, I keep completely forgetting to mention this, figures do not come back after they die. There are some notable exceptions, but otherwise they have their own figure graveyard that's completely separate from the library graveyard from your spells and cards. But other than that, this is everything. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you've watched all the way through all this, I know this was a lot of information to throw at you all at once, but hopefully you were able to find some enjoyment and were able to learn something new today. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video.